Stay tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. In the studio, waiting to be profiled, is playwright Willard Sims and librettist Michael Korie. Also on the set are two beautiful sculptures, one in wood and one in bronze by artist Gwen Murrell. Writer Willard Sims, a Colorado native, now calls LA home. It seems his plays, based on the lives of illustrious and complex literary characters, have really taken hold with theater audiences. Actually, all over the world, Willard has things playing. So tell us, how did this actually happen to have these worldwide venues?
Well, my first one act that I wrote became very popular in England quite a few years ago, and I built a reputation in England, and then I've kind of expanded it. And I think the fact that I do historical characters and characters from places like Germany, Albert Einstein, Italy, Leonardo da Vinci, it also helps because I have a natural tie-in with some of these different countries.
Have you always written for the stage?
No, I actually have written several historical pieces for television also. I did a series called The Spirit of 76, an animated series on the American Revolution. I did a mini-series on St. Francis of Assisi, and I did a piece on Leonardo da Vinci narrated by Vincent Price.
Did that actually start you, this historical? What actually started you looking into these characters? And also, I think your characters have to have flaws in them before you're interested.
Absolutely. I try to get characters like myself, and I'm very flawed, so I don't want any perfect people. I have to write from my soul, and I'm not perfect. Well, actually, it was just a circumstance that I kind of fell into it. I was in Colorado just graduated from college in the early 1970s, and a producer that I knew wanted to take a play out on tour, a small play, and I did a big proposal and wound up writing the play for the state historical, the centennial. It was in 1976, it was the nation's bicentennial, 200 years, and Colorado's 100-year centennial. I wrote a play on the history of Colorado, and then immediately after that, I moved to New York, where I instantly got a job writing a television series on the American Revolution.
Oh, so it really did just all of a sudden. Was that your interest?
Oh, I'd been writing plays. I had 4 one-act plays published. I had my first play published when I was in college.
But from a historical point of view, though?
No, none of them were historical. They were about younger people. I was writing kind of about myself.
Which is pretty natural, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And imaginative sort of situations, somewhat surrealistic. And I loved historical writing. I mean, I found out what a great thing to do. I can go to libraries and read books and be paid for it.
And the other thing is, you find these geniuses in history. How do you decide what to bring out in their character? Because after all, you only have an hour and 90 minutes maybe sometimes, maybe 2 hours, depending on what kind of play you're doing.
Well, in the case of Edgar Allan Poe, I always believe I have to have a personal connection with these characters. In the case of Edgar Allan Poe, my mother and my father were extremely different, and Poe was raised in his early years by his stepmother, who was very, very artistic, and then was adopted by a man who was very much the agricultural business leader of his day. My father was an agricultural business leader. When Poe was 7 years old, he was taken to England, and they tried to remake him into a little British child. When I was 10 years old, I was taken to England, and my English relatives tried to remake me into a little British child. So there were, some similarities. I'm a writer. I like to drink.
There were a lot of familiar pieces then. The familiarity in the character seems to to transfer over to what you're familiar with then?
I took Poe's circumstances and matched them up with the emotional realities of my own life. And I had a co-writer, Glenn Bennis, who worked on the structure. He's done a lot of cinema, and he helped me get a very cinematic structure to the piece.
Because that does seem, this piece seems different from many of the other pieces that you've written. Basically one person or two-person plays. We have a clip from Poe, and I think this would be a great time to show it. Do you want to tell us who the actor is, Anthony? And
yes, this is Anthony Scorti, a wonderful actor from Great Britain who was a member of the Royal Shakespeare Company and is currently a member of Vanessa Redgrave's company. He's doing a scene where Poe is speaking at a salon in New York to a literary gathering.
Okay.
This salon has been graced by the likes of many gifted authors, including Emerson, Dickens, and Longfellow. Fortunately, this last poet and I were invited at different times. As I'm sure you're aware, we've had our differences. One would never know, considering the vitriol on his part, that at one time he liked me enormously. So much so that he appropriated great chunks of my writing. At many of these gatherings, I'm asked to read one piece more than any other, The Raven. So, I will purposefully not read that tonight. It is not because I am perverse. It is because I am terribly perverse. From childhood's hour, I have not been as others were. I have not seen as others saw.
You know, we always remember Poe with The Raven and the alliteration and, and what we were taught in English class. But there were so many other things that you brought out about his character in the play.
Well, he was considered the finest critic of his time. He created the short story form, he created the detective story, he created the horror genre. I mean, he is kind of the seminal American writer. If it wasn't for Edgar Allan Poe, we wouldn't have Raymond Chandler, we wouldn't have Dashiell Hammett. So he is the man who moved literature forward in our country.
And we don't think about him basically as being American.
No, in fact, he was really discovered in France because Baudelaire translated his poetry and did a wonderful job of translating. And in France, he's still by many considered the finest American poet. American.
But see, we think of him as being European of some sort only because of these translations maybe that you're talking about, or living in London, as you said, for a short period of time. But a real American was the character George Wright from America that you were another play you did.
That's a piece that I wrote on the first great black American writer who really developed a world following, Richard Wright, who wrote the book Native Son, which absolutely revolutionized American literature. And yes, I just had to get into someone who had that kind of passion and that kind of anger, and who has now kind of been forgotten about. And when the piece was done at the Edinburgh Festival, it was an absolute sensation there. People went out and there was a rush on Richard Wright's books in the bookstores. And when it was done at the Telluride Theatre Festival, it was also tremendously popular, and there was another kind of resurgence of interest in Richard Wright. I think he's one of the greatest American writers, and it's unfortunate that he's kind of out of fashion.
Did he write those books in the 60s?
He wrote those books in the 40s and 50s.
Oh, earlier.
Yeah, he wrote them earlier. By the 60s, they were out of fashion.
Oh, they were already gone. But were they very popular when he first wrote them? I remember Native Son. I mean, I just remember that it was a very popular book. I don't remember reading it all.
Yes, it was on the bestseller list, and it was also Book of the Month Club selection.
So it was.
It is taught in schools, but, you know, if you talk to adults now, younger adults now, their only familiarity with Richard Wright is if they've learned about him in school. They don't buy his books in the bookstores.
I see. One of the things you mentioned were the festivals, and you've been to Edinburgh, you've done Telluride. How do you get invited to these festivals?
I did the Spoleto Festival, and that was very interesting. That was in Italy, and a producer in Italy got a copy of my script on Albert Einstein, and they had it translated into Italian. They liked it so much. And then they got in touch with my agent and my publisher, and I had nothing to do with it. I went over to the Spoleto Festival not having any idea what they'd done was my play, kind of terrified, not knowing if it was going to be good or bad, and it was really wonderful.
Oh, so
It was very wonderful.
So it's just by happenstance. You can't put your work up in front of them and say, consider me.
Last year, I took Right from America to the Edinburgh Festival, actually because my wife at the time knew the director of Theatre Workshop, which is an absolutely gorgeous theatre in Scotland. And as a result of the success of that play, actually a critic introduced me to Guy Masterson, who was probably the top producer of one-person plays in Scotland and Great Britain. And he was looking for a vehicle for an actress he had discovered who happened to win that very year the award for the Best Actress in the Edinburgh Fringe Festival.
Oh, so just as really word of mouth, working
That's
it. I was recently in Malta, and they have a festival, an arts festival that runs maybe 6 months out of the year, and they have a parade of the Grand Masters from the Knights of St. John who left Jerusalem and came and saved the island of Malta. And I was thinking that since they do this all the time, one of those characters has to be perfect for you, because those Grand Masters were all from wealthy families. They all were strong, very masculine, but there were never any women around. So I thought maybe you could find some kind of thing. You can go to Malta, do that festival, stay at the Phoenicia Hotel, and then show it at the Manol, it's spelled Manol, it's pronounced Manuel Theatre, which has been in existence since the 1700s.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
So I think that's the place you have to think of next. One of the other things, one of the other people that you talked about was Zelda Fitzgerald.
That's right. She fascinated me because I love the 20s. I think it was just one of the most exciting times in the history of America, and I love the style of the 20s. And Zelda epitomized the 20s. I mean, she created the flapper look, and she was painted with the finest writers of the day. She knew Ernest Hemingway, John Dos Passos. Of course, she was married to Scott Fitzgerald. She knew everyone. Ring Lardner used to throw rings of flowers at her feet. And she was just such a fascinating character because Scott told her, live your life so that I can write about you. And I thought there were so many similarities with what goes on today with women who get too many roles. I mean, Zelda was a mother, she was an inspiration for Scott, she was a woman who wanted to be a dancer, and she really couldn't figure out where she belonged, and at the same time she was of a family where she developed schizophrenia.
And I was going to say, where was her flaw?
Her flaw was schizophrenia, which was hereditary. It wasn't her, she was a tragic figure.
Oh, so it was. So that was what you brought out in her. And this was a one-person play.
It was a one-person play with Zelda in a mental institution trying to convince the doctors in the mental institution that she needs to be allowed to visit her daughter on her daughter's birthday outside of the institution.
And we have a clip from that play.
Yes.
I love the clips that you've brought because they're very clear and they're very strong. This is Lisa Pelican.
Who's wonderful, Lisa Pelican, absolutely gorgeous actress. And to play the great glamour queen of America in the 20s, you need a gorgeous actress who can act.
And she was a dancer.
And she was a dancer.
Lisa started as
That's
a ballet
right.
dancer, so
That's
you
right.
got it all in this character.
Yeah, wonderful.
So should we see that clip?
Sure, yes, let's see it.
I really had a career of my own. Oh, God. How many times have I wondered what my diagnosis would have been if only I'd had a female doctor? A female doctor not impressed by literary reputation, so I'd chosen for myself. A doctor with a child stretched and torn between career and motherhood, still dependent on her husband, even though she'd outgrown him, desperate to make... Why does my head keep on pounding? Oh, those fingers reaching. Oh, and that voice, I hate hearing won't stop.
Oh, she is so fabulous. Did she have to take coaching lessons for this Southern accent?
She did. She's an absolute master. I mean, her Southern accent is flawless as far as I'm concerned.
You know, you've taught us so much about the way you do things today. I know you teach a seminar. Or is it a seminar or is it a class?
Well, actually, I taught a class at UCLA, and then because I travel so much now going to festivals, I haven't been able to teach at UCLA on a regular basis, so I teach a seminar in one-person plays. And this play, in fact, Zelda Fitzgerald, was done at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and I'm hoping that in the future, if I'm invited back to Edinburgh, I can teach a festival on one-person plays over there.
Oh, that would be fabulous. What do you include, very quickly before we have to leave you, Willard? I'm sorry.
I include how to do research, how to find the connection between yourself and the character, how to keep the play funny, because no one wants to sit with one person for an hour and a half without getting a chuckle here and there, and how to make the piece dramatic.
But it's mostly about someone else. It's not a one-person play that's a showcase for that actor, because there's a difference, I guess.
Well, actually, I have worked with writers who have done showcases, if not really a showcase, but who've made themselves the center. But I think it's always easier to get something out there commercially if there's a name attached to it. People want to know about Abraham Lincoln. People want to know about Richard Wright. People want to know about Albert Einstein. I
see. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. We've really enjoyed having you and seeing all the things that you can do.
Thank you, Joan. A real pleasure.
We'll be right back with Michael Korie. Don't go away. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and we're back with librettist Michael Korie, who's in California for the premiere of the Long Beach opera production of Hopper's Wife. Michael wrote the lyrics for Hopper's Wife. The music is written by Stuart Wallace. The two also wrote the opera about Harvey Milk, which played in Texas, New York, and Germany. Michael's been recognized by the NEA, Opera America, and ASCAP. He must have a vivid imagination. Do you, Michael?
I guess so.
Yeah. Because you find things and then you really sock it to the audience.
I've been accused. I don't know why I fixate on a certain topic or not. Probably if I was obsessed with easier topics, I'd be a wealthier man.
Maybe they do a little too avant-garde, is that it?
Perhaps.
Tell us about Hopper's Wife.
Well, Hopper's Wife was an idea that evolved in a very bizarre way. We had done, Stuart Wallace and I had done a very big opera called Where's Dick? And it was done in Houston and directed by the very avant-garde Richard Foreman. And it was a big production. And I decided I wanted to do something nice and easy. And nothing is ever easy. But I had a list of characters I was interested in writing about. And at the top of the list was the wife of the American artist Edward Hopper. Her name was Josephine Hopper. And towards the bottom of the list was the gossip columnist Hedda Hopper, known for her hats.
It really was. It really was.
There was a list of names that I was thinking of doing a one-person opera about.
And how did you get this list of names, first of all?
I compile lists.
You just
I'm a
were
list
thinking?
maker, yeah, and I kept a list for these sort of meetings, and the composer said, hey. And I said, hey. And we both sort of got the idea at once, let's make the two women one woman.
Is that?
Yeah, Josephine Hopper. And then it instantly occurred to us that this would thematically then be a piece that would pit low culture, popular culture against high culture. And this was around the time of all the NEA wars, Jesse Helms, all of that. And it said this might be a way of writing a piece about the issues we're dealing with today without ever saying so. Setting it in a distant mythological past, fictionalizing history, and writing a wild, outrageous piece that would amuse us for the next 5 years, because that's how long it takes to write a piece.
It took that long?
Well, when you add music and you have to get these expensive things called operas produced. It takes a long time.
The funny thing is, you talk about all the underlying things in it, which to us nowadays are not provocative, really. They're politically correct things to think about and to look back on the past and put these two things in
Well,
focus.
I think this piece was actually a victim of political correctness. There were a couple of productions that fell through because people didn't like that Mrs. Hopper was not a victim. This character, Josephine, she's never called by that name, by the way, and she's never called Hedda. He's never called Edward. He is merely called Hopper. She is just called Mrs. Hopper, and the third character is Ava, who's loosely based on Ava Gardner. But we never call them by those names because we want to use the idea of them rather than the actuality, because I have no intention of sticking to the facts.
I see. So it is a figment of your imagination, and it is a very lucid, focused kind of...
intentionally so, because we take the idea and then we go somewhere with it, because it is a piece about ideas.
But you know, Mrs. Hopper was a victim, wasn't she? Didn't he have a long affair with one of his...
Well, she was a victim. She supported him in his career, subjugated her own career. The PC thing would have been to make her a tragic heroine. But that's not what happens in this piece. She becomes almost worse than her husband. She becomes Hedda Hopper out of anger and revenge and burns all the paintings that she herself posed for.
But was she posing for his pictures, or did he have this other model
In real life, Edward Hopper used his wife as his constant muse. And he would paint her in a lot of different hats, a lot of different outfits, and then change it. Which was another reason that the whole hat connection occurred to me.
I see.
Josephine changed her identity as a woman who wore many hats. And of course, Hedda Hopper, the gossip columnist, was known for her outrageous collection of hats.
Yes, always.
And photographed always in hats, appeared in movie cameos in hats.
Always.
And so the idea of changing identities through changing hats became a theatrical device.
That's great, because
I don't mind using devices. I feel devices are very theatrical and express an idea in, like a picture says 1,000 words, a theatrical concept or device says it all so much faster.
Is this Mrs. Hopper?
Well, that started out as Mrs. Hopper, but Mrs. Hopper bears no resemblance to that model in the doorway, because he in the lobby of the theater, actually, where this piece is now playing at the Long Beach Opera, you see the sketches of Josephine Hopper, and then you see the final painting. They bear no resemblance because he started from a real point of view, and then he changed it in his imagination. So this piece begins with a new woman in the doorway, the character of Ava, who eventually becomes Ava Gardner.
So this is very important to the play,
yes,
this picture.
This picture, yes. Then Mrs. Hopper arrives home and finds out that she's been displaced. She's no longer his model, no longer his muse. And that starts the friction.
Then tell me why this opera is so provocative. So far, what you've told us is not, it's...
I don't think that it's provocative, but people do. There are issues of language, nudity, profanity, things like that.
Is it true that the woman does the first quarter or half of the opera nude?
Yes.
How much of it? Totally nude?
Well, the opera is about an hour and 40 minutes, and the first scene is about 20 minutes, and then the next scene that she's in, she's also nude in a bathtub.
Well, then we didn't have to worry about costumes, did we?
Well, we have plenty of costumes, let me tell you, with all those hats. But for her, no.
But did you choose someone for her voice? I mean, first you had to choose someone for her voice and then for her body?
You know, there was a rumor going around New York in the operatic circles when we were casting this that we were casting for looks, but that's not true. She's a model. She's an artist model. It's no big deal to paint a life study, and that's what I thought. But I guess it's not so usual for opera singers to sing nude. Most of them don't have the figure to do it.
That was a thing.
To be quite frankly.
Right.
Let's speak quite frankly. But our trouble in casting this was vocal. That's always the problem, to find who has the best diction, who can act at the same time that they sing. That's the rarest thing in opera. And I think we're very lucky in that we found 3 wonderful singers who really can act.
Can you read us some of your lyrics?
Oh, you know, I don't like to do that because I feel that what I write is not poetry or doggerel to be recited. I feel that it really only comes to life when music is added to it. And I think that's always a problem in reading a libretto of an opera. People think that they get it. They don't get it until they hear the music, particularly the way I write with Stuart. We have a long collaboration now, 12 years, 4 operas. Ooh. And we know each other's habits. And I know I can write a certain way, and that his music will bring out the colors, so that I don't have to give the literal, I don't have to give the obvious, I don't have to storytell in my lyrics. I can write subtext. I can write the lies that people say.
Yeah.
And his music can tell the truth.
And then what about Harvey Milk? Did you have the same kind of problems with that?
Harvey Milk was an immense project. Took years of writing, and from that I felt very differently about changing the facts. I knew I did not want to write a so-called docu-opera. I knew that opera has to be mythological in order to work on a music theatrical level. Nonetheless, there were living people who are still alive who are characters in the opera. And Harvey Milk is a figure of great importance to many Americans, straight, gay, and lesbian, a figure of civil rights.
So when you see Harvey Milk or listen to the opera, you're getting something that's honest.
You're getting a mix, you're getting a fictionalized approach, but to the truth.
To the truth.
To the truth. We wanted to get to the core of the man, what made Harvey Milk, this man who in the middle of his life, in his mid-40s, changed his entire life from being a Wall Street stockbroker who campaigned for Barry Goldwater to being this outspoken civil rights activist for gay and lesbian rights in San Francisco, who was assassinated by the forces that he was fighting against.
That was very interesting, and it was interesting that you could actually make an opera of it, and it's shown all over.
Well, our most gratifying performance actually was at the San Francisco Opera premiere just a few months ago. It was wonderful to see it done in San Francisco where it happened.
And we're glad that you were here with us, because we wouldn't have known about all these things. And I know we'll be seeing these operas all across the country and in Europe. And I want to thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Don't forget to continue writing 777 Figueroa, 40th floor. And we'll see you next time on the Joan Quinn Profiles. Thank you.
Thank you.